Spring 451 AD. The Rhine's waters run thick with the silt of 1,000 hooves, churning under a sky heavy as hammered iron. You stand at the river's edge near Moguntiacum, the air sharp with the tang of wet earth and something fouler charred wood from distant farms already put to the torch. The ground trembles. First a low rumble like thunder trapped in the soil, then the sound swells, war cries in a tongue like shattering bone, the creak of leather harnesses strained against horseflesh, the wet slap of flanks against water as they ford the current. Your habit clings damp to your skin, the wool heavy from morning prayers cut short by the scouts' frantic horns. Beside you, Sister Aemilia clutches her rosary beads, her knuckles white as chalk, whispering Pater Noster under her breath. The first riders crest the bank, their faces scarred and furred eyes glinting like flint struck in darkness. They spill across the fields in a black tide, bows already nocked arrows whispering death to the sentries on the walls. Smoke rises from the thatched roofs of outlying hamlets, acrid and oily, carrying the faint sickly undernote of burning flesh. You press against the convent gate, heart pounding in rhythm with the drum of their advance, the iron latch cold under your palm. One rider breaks from the pack reins in his mount yards away and levels his gaze at you, assessing hungry. The world narrows to that stare, the way it strips away stone and vow alike. In that moment, as his lips curl in a grin that bares filed teeth, you understand. This is not war. This is unraveling. What kind of scourge unleashes hell upon the consecrated, turning sanctuaries into slaughterhouses? Before we go further, I need to be transparent. What you're about to hear involves sexual violence and systematic desecration woven into the fabric of a campaign that targeted the vulnerable holy women clergy, entire communities of faith. These details draw from fragmented primary accounts like Priscus of Panium's eyewitness fragments, Jordanes Getica, and hagiographical vitae, such as those of Saints Nicasius and Genevieve, corroborated by chroniclers like Hydadeus and Prosper of Aquitaine. Modern scholarship, including Hyun Jin Kim's The Huns, Rome, and The Birth of Europe 2013, parses the propaganda from the plunder, but the core horrors remain documented assaults on churches, slaying of monks and maidens, and a terror that left scars in the soil. If these shadows press too close, if the weight of ancient cries feels too immediate, step away without shame. History's darkness is not a gauntlet to run, but a vigil to keep on your terms. For those who remain, know this: we'll trace not just the blade's edge, but the machinery of empire and invasion that forged it. The economic desperation, the religious fault lines, the psychological calculus of fear as weapon. These aren't tales to titillate. They're blueprints of what power devours when piety stands in its path. And in remembering, we dismantle them. This wasn't a frenzy of barbarian lust run amok. This was calculated erasure, a nomadic horde siege engine turned inward on the fragile lattice of Roman Christianity in Gaul. The figure of 40,000 consecrated women, defiled, whispered in later medieval chronicles, like those echoing Gregory of Tours' amplifications in his Historia. Francorum is almost certainly hyperbolic, a numeral swollen by terror's echo chamber, blending hagiographic hyperbole with the raw tally of ravaged convents from Metz to Reims. Priscus, the Byzantine diplomat who dined at Attila's table mere years before, records no such precise count, but his fragments in the Excerpta Delegationibus detail the Huns' methodical despoiling of sacred spaces across their empire-spanning raids from the Balkans to the Rhine. What we can verify across multiple sources, Jordanes drawing on lost Cassiodorus texts, Hydacius's Iberian Chronicle syncing with Prosper's Roman Epitome, is a campaign that systematically profaned the holy churches, gutted like beasts altars slick with clerical blood, and yes, maidens and nuns slain or violated in numbers that, while unquantified, shattered communities. In 451, as Attila's host, perhaps 100,000 strong, a polyglot swarm of Huns, Gepids, Ostrogoths, and Alans swept into Gaul, it wasn't mere conquest. It was psychological warfare, avant la lettre, targeting the vows that bound Roman society: chastity as rebellion, faith as fortress. The Huns, pagan steppe-dwellers viewing Christian asceticism as effete weakness, didn't just burn, they unmade. This terror amplified in saintly lives like Callinicus's Life of Hypatius, recalling earlier Thrace raids where monks and maidens fell in droves, seeped into Gaul's narrative, birthing the legend of 40,000 to quantify the unquantifiable loss. The question isn't whether you can stomach the ledger of the lost, it's whether you're willing to remember it not as spectacle, but as sentinel against the machines that still grind today, authoritarian regimes that weaponize invasion against the devout from medieval pogroms to modern displacements. In an era where refugee columns snake across borders under drone shadows, Attila's shadow lingers, reminding us that borders bleed. If you believe these silenced vows deserve amplification, consider subscribing. Every engagement unearths another fragment from the archives, turning whispers into warnings. To grasp the defilement that scarred Gaul's soul in 451, you must first dismantle the myth of the lone monster astride his horse. Attila wasn't forged in some primordial fury. He was manufactured by the steppe's unforgiving forge, tempered by Rome's own duplicity, and quenched in the blood of kin. The Hunnic world of the 5th century was no idyllic nomad utopia, but a precarious confederation, a machine of tribute and terror stitched from felt tents and iron stirrups, sprawling from the Volga's bend to the Danube's froth. By the 430s, under Rua Attila's uncle and predecessor, the Huns had evolved from scattered raiders into a proto-empire, extracting annual subsidies from the Eastern Roman court at Constantinople, gold talents by the wagon load 350 in 435 alone per Priscus's embassy records to buy the peace they perpetually broke. This wasn't barbarism, it was bureaucracy on horseback assets, tallied in slaves and silk psychological protocols designed to keep sedentary foes quaking. The political climate, a Roman diarchy fracturing under child emperors Valentinian III, a puppet in Ravenna, Theodosius II dithering in Byzantium, while Gaul, the western splinter, festered under Visigothic pressure and Bagaudae banditry. Economically, the Huns thrived on the arbitrage of fear, raiding Thrace in 441–447. They netted 6,000 pounds of gold per the treaty. Priscus chronicled funding a military that blended composite bows with captured cataphracts. Socially, hierarchy ruled noble Huns and scale male subject tribes as fodder, yet all bound by the cult of the sky god Tengri, who demanded blood for bounty. These events, the invasion's prelude, are attested in Priscus's fragments preserved in the 9th century Constantine Porphyrogenitus, excerpts corroborated by archaeological hoards of Roman coinage in Hungarian plains, unminted lumps melted for steppe jewelry. He wasn't born to this shadow. Born around 406 AD perhaps in the Neusiedler Sea's misty vales, Attila entered a family dynasty already laced with fratricide's bitter thread. His father Mundzuk, a minor chieftain whose name whispers through Jordanes as the man who sired scourges, was no warrior king, but a herdsman whose yurts hugged the Tisza's banks, the air thick with mare's milk curdled into kumis and the lowing of shaggy cattle. Mundzuk's eyes, dark as polished jet, held a quiet cunning. He taught young Attila the arc of the bowstring, the feint of the feigned retreat, but died early, perhaps 415, felled by a rival clan's arrow during a border skirmish with the Akatsiri, his body left for wolves as steppe custom decreed. Attila, then 9, watched the pyre smoke curl skyward, the flames devouring the felt shroud, tasting ash on his tongue for the first time. His mother, unnamed in sources, but evoked in Priscus's court vignettes as a woman of fierce aspect, her braids heavy with amber beads, clung to widowhood's precarious perch, weaving alliances through whispered marriages. She lasted until 420, succumbing to the cough that ravaged the camps that winter, her final breaths ragged in the oil lamp glow, urging Attila and his brother Bleda to ride as one or fall as none. By 12, Attila roamed with the auxiliary bands, his frame wiry face already marked by the ritual scar across his cheek, a badge of Hunnic manhood. The brothers rose under Uncle Rua, who in 432 elevated them to sub-kings, but Rua's death in 434, choking on a fishbone at a banquet per Jordanes Raya's side, thrust them into co-rule. Bleda the elder by a year, broader of shoulder with a laugh like rolling gravel favored diplomacy. He brokered the 435 Margus Treaty pocketing Roman gold, while Attila chafed his mind turning on the axis of betrayal. The transformation accelerated in shadows. Priscus embedded at Attila's oaken hall in 449, a palace of lashed logs reeking of smoked mutton and unwashed hides, notes the king's short, broad-chested frame eyes, small and piercing, a flat nose scarred from some old blow. But it was the losses that hollowed him. First, a cousin's ambush in 436 during the Illyrian campaigns, the boy scarcely 15 gutted in a night raid, his entrails steaming on the frost. Attila claimed the head parading it from his saddlebow, but confided to Priscus later of dreams where the dead whispered accusations. Then, Bleda his mirror and menace. In 445, on the Nidau's banks, amid a stag hunt, the air crisp with autumn's bite leaves crunching under hoof, Attila orchestrated the fratricide. Sources diverge. Jordan spins it as a boar spear accident, Hydacious as deliberate shaft in the gloom. Whatever the thrust, Bleda fell, his blood soaking the sedge, and Attila stood alone, 39, the last of his line. There never was a better servant, nor a worse master. Suetonius might have quipped of emperors, but Priscus echoes it for Attila, obsequious to Roman envoys one day, unleashing his ver sacrum sacred spring host on their borders the next. Psychologically, the stages unfolded like a bow's draw, childhood's resilience hardening to adolescent cunning under Munzuk's tutelage, Rua's court-forging ambition into alloy, Bleda's shadow sharpening paranoia into policy. By 430, with Honoria's ring-borne plea, a desperate bid for power from the Western court misinterpreted as betrothal. Attila's mind clicked like a latch. Gaul was not land but ledger. Vengeance for slights real and imagined, and in that pivot the machine whirred to life. And then everything changed. The envoys from Ravenna arrived in the shadow of the Carpathians, their togas dust-caked bearing Valentinian's seal. But Attila's delusion, Honoria's missive, smuggled with a ring promising half the empire for rescue from her brother's yoke. Priscus, recalling the scene in his Byzantine dispatches, describes Attila's hall that night, torches sputtering grease, the king hunched over a map scratched in beeswax, his fingers tracing the Rhine's curve like a vein to bleed. "The West is mine by vow," he growled, voice a rasp honed by endless steps, and the thanes murmured assent, their caftans stiff with old sweat. Dawn broke cold horns blaring the muster's call, and the horde coalesced 50,000 Hunnic corps hardened by Thracian scars, swelled by 50,000 federates, Ostrogothic lancers in scale, Allan horse archers with quivers of whistling death, wagons groaned under siege gear, looted from Naissus ballistae, of twisted sinew mantlets of oxhide. Attila mounted his grey gelding, the beast's flanks scarred from spur and lash, and pointed west. "For the Sky Father's wrath," he intoned, but his eyes burned with the accountant's gleam, Gaul's villas ripe for stripping its bishop's coffers, fat with tithes. The column snaked forth in march, a serpent of dust and dung, fording the Danube's tributaries under skies spitting sleet. By April's ides, the Rhine yielded its forts unmanned by Aetius's stretched legions. What followed wasn't storm. It was system. Cities as assets, faith as foe. And in the convent's cloisters, the first vows cracked. What I'm about to describe isn't random savagery born of the saddle's sway. It's a system, 5 deliberate thrusts into Gaul's heart, each calibrated to unpick a thread of the spirit sanctuary vow community resistance legacy. The Huns didn't wander into defilement. They engineered it per the protocols Priscus glimpsed scouts, mapping holy houses first for their gold and their symbolism. Each act drawn from Hydacius's tally of churches profaned and hagiographies like the Passio Nicasii reveals not just the blade, but the empire's calculus behind it. In Gaul's green folds where vineyards clung to hills like desperate fingers, this machine ground vows to dust. First came the ford, the threshold where heaven met hell's advance. Early April 451. The Rhine, swelled with meltwater from Alpine, passes its banks, a slurry of mud and minnows under a pall of low cloud. The air hummed with the buzz of early bees, undercut by the distant lowing of herds driven ahead as fodder. Attila's vanguard, Gepid auxiliaries, in fur-trimmed cloaks, their broadaxes slung low, pushed through the shallows near Argentoratum, now Strasbourg's ghost, the current tugging at their horses' bellies like greedy hands. Roman outposts undermanned garrisons of Limitanae, in rusted mail, fired futile volleys from willow palisades, their ballista bolts splashing harmless. Who was present? Federati scouts in leather breeches, Hunnic nobles with torque necklaces glinting dully, and the first wave of camp followers, women bartered from Thracian sacks, their faces veiled in shame. Politically, this was the faint Valentinians' envoys, still parleyed in Ravenna, buying time with vague promises, while Aetius scrambled federates from Armorica's mists. The season's mildness mocked the mood buds unfurling on elder trees, the scent of hawthorn sweet against the reek of equine sweat. In the shadow of those palisades lay the convent of the Vale, a cluster of wattle and daub cells housing 24 sisters under Abbess Valeria, aged 42, her once golden hair now threaded silver from vigils that stretched like taffy. Valeria had entered at 18, fleeing a betrothal to a Frankish count whose ambitions mirrored Rome's decay. Her days were ledgered in psalters, her nights in kneading dough for the poor. That dawn, as horns shattered matins, she gathered her charges in the oratory. The stone floor chill under bare feet, the air thick with incense from the previous eve's thurible. Sister Clara, 19, fresh vowed with cheeks still round, as harvest moons clutched a wooden crucifix, her mind wandering to the brother she'd left in Colonia, did he till the fields unmolested. The sisters' habits undyed, wool rough as penance whispered as they shifted stomachs, hollow from Lenten fasts, now forgotten in fear. Tension coiled like a bow, a sentry's cry cut short the thud of bodies hitting earth, then the gates splinter under ram's blow. The Huns poured in a dozen at first broad-faced warriors with braids greased in tallow, their boots caked in river slime. Their leader, a sub-chief named Onegesius, per Priscus's later roster, inspected Valeria, the way a merchant eyes flawed pottery, his calloused hand tilting her chin. "Gold for the god-woman," he grunted in broken Latin, but his gaze lingered, stripping layers of linen and resolve. The lead-up stretched eternal sisters herded to the nave wrists bound with saddle thongs that bit like wire, the air turning sour with unwashed hides and fear sweat. Onegesius led Valeria away, first the oratory door thudding shut behind them, the room falling to a hush, broken only by Clara's stifled sob. When they dragged her back hours later, she could not stand, her gaze fixed on the crucifix adrift in some inner sea, murmuring, "Domine non sum digna." The others followed in pairs, the desecration a rhythm of shadows and stifled pleas implied in the Vita Genovefi's veiled allusions to profaned chastity across Gaul's houses. Clara resisted whispering scripture in Greek till a backhand silenced her, but her spirit held. She prayed silently through the night unbroken. This wasn't about flesh alone. This was about the system, a deliberate unmooring of faith's anchors. Priscus, analyzing Hunnic tactics from his embassy vantage notes, how they prioritized Cicella chapels and convents as soft targets, their violation not lust's spill, but propaganda's ink-pagan thunder against Christian meekness. In Gaul's hierarchy, nuns were assets to dowries funneled to bishoprics, their labor sustaining the poor amid tax hikes that bled the curiales dry. By profaning them, the Huns didn't just claim bodies, they audited souls, turning vows into voids. Scholarly debate rages. Kim 2013 argues economic motive, the gold hidden in altars, while Schultheis 2019 in the Battle of the Catalonian Plains sees religious warfare, Huns viewing asceticism as emasculation. Either way, the pattern fits broader. Hunnic playbook Thrace's 447 sack, where Callinicus tallies maidens slain in holy precincts, echoed here. Long-term at frayed Gaul's fabric convents, emptied recruits fleeing to cloisters swelled, then burst, seeding the monastic boom under Cassian. They didn't seek martyrs, martyrs rally. They sought ghosts, echoes in empty cells. And in those ghosts, the social weave unraveled families, sundered faith's network of alms and aid collapsed, leaving villages to banditry. Modern parallels think Taliban edicts on Afghan schools, or ISIS's Yazidi captives where violation is verb not noun, a tool to erase identity. Here in 451's mud, the blueprint emerged terror as total from body to belief. The sisters' silence wasn't surrender, it was seed-germinating resistance in hidden scripts. But he wasn't sated with thresholds. The horde pressed on, carving deeper into Gaul's vitals, where rivers ran red with the unbound. Mid-April, the weather turned clement, a balm of sun on greening meadows that belied the black coils of smoke rising from hamlets. The air carried the metallic bite of blood, mingled with spring's tentative blooms, violets crushed under cartwheels. Attila's main host, now a mile-wide ribbon of dust, coiled toward Divodurum Metz's ancient knot, its walls of yellowed limestone, etched by 2 centuries of legionary sweat. Present the full panoply, Hunic Decani in lacquered armor, their recurved bows slung like scythes, Alan's skirmishers on ponies no taller than wolves' faces, tattooed in azure spirals, and the siege-trained oxen lowing under fascines and rams hewn from Rhine oaks. Politically, whispers from Aetius spies reached Ravenna too late. Valentinian dithered parceling bribes to Burgundians, while Visigoths under Theodoric I hemmed south. The city's folk, a mix of Gallo-Romans in tunics frayed at hems and Frankish federati in wool cloaks, barred gates against the tide, their archers' shafts hissing futilely. At Metz's edge squatted the Abbey of St. Stephen, a modest priory of 30 souls, led by Mother Superior Eusebia. 51, her frame bent like a wind-whipped yew from years copying codices by tallow flicker. Eusebia had vowed at 25 post-plague, her scribe's hands ink-stained mind, a repository of Jerome's letters smuggled from Bethlehem. That eve, as dusk bruised the sky purple, she rallied her flock in the refectory, the trestles still scarred from Lenten suppers, the scent of barley pottage lingering like a half-remembered mercy. Sister Theodora, 23. A weaver from Trier's looms, whose fingers danced shuttles like prayers, thought of her orphan niece fostered in the almshouse safe, perhaps in God's ledger. Their vestments coarse, serge patched with piety rustled as they knelt, throats dry from chants that faltered at the horizon's growl. Tension built like a fever. The first arrows thunked into thatch flames, leaping greedy. Then the breach gate sundered by a ram's bronze beak, echoing like judgment's hammer. The Huns surged 40 strong, this wave led by a Captain Jordanes, named Ardaric, his beard braided with enemy teeth, cloak stinking of horse piss and victory. He surveyed Eusebia as one might a rival's banner, ripping her pectoral cross free with a laugh that barked like a seal. "Your God hides in skirts," he sneered, herding them to the cloister's heart, where flagstones gleamed slick from spilled lamp oil. The prelude dragged deliberate sisters lined against walls veined with moss wrists, lashed to iron rings meant for bells, the air thickening with the invaders' guttural jests. Ardaric claimed Eusebia, first dragging her to the abbess's cell, the doors barred, dropping with finality, the other's world shrinking to the scrape of boots and muffled defiance. Hours bled into night. When they hauled her forth, she collapsed, eyes hollowed to pits, lips moving in silent Te Deum, her dignity a thread unspooled but not severed. Theodora next her resistance, a flung shuttle that gashed a cheek, yet in the dim as shadows lengthened, she clung to a fragment of vellum, inscribing mentally the psalm that sustained her. The acts cascaded, a profane litany restrained in Hydacius's chronicle, as consecrated vessels dashed, leaving the priory a husk by dawn, vows profaned but spirits etched with unyielding script. This thrust exposed the system's gears, not conquest chaos but erasure's engineering. Jordanes, synthesizing Priscus, describes Huns as devourers of sanctity, their raids a taxonomy of terror, churches first for the gleam of chalices, convents second for the symbolism of shattered purity. In Gaul's stratified order, abbeys were nodes in a network of patronage funneling grain to legions, prayers to emperors. Violating them severed sinews, as Kim elucidates, accelerating the West's fiscal collapse. Debate swirls was a Tengri's ritual, demanding blood from bloodless Christians or mere spoils. Schulteis counters with economic lens. Nuns' dowries hidden in crypts funded further forays. The ripple demography skewed Gaul's Christian core. 70% by Prosper's estimates saw vocations plummet, birthing a crisis of heirless estates that fed feudalism's rise. Parallels pulse modern Boko Haram's Chibok girls abducted to unmake education's vow, or Rohingya camps where sanctity fractures under siege. Here, the Huns didn't forge martyrs to venerate. They crafted voids to haunt, unraveling the communal web alms, chains broken orphanages orphaned anew. Eusebia's priory rebuilt in stone by 500 per archaeological footings at Saint-Pierre-la-Cour stands testament. Ghosts don't dissipate, they testify. The machine hummed on, but in those voids, seeds of defiance stirred, scribes copying fragments, ensuring the profaned would not be forgotten. What happened next reveals the horde's hunger for the hearthlands, where faith's flames burned brightest amid the hearths they quenched. Late April skies cleared to a mocking blue winds off the Moselle, carrying the perfume of apple blossom laced with pyre smoke's bite. The column bloated now, wagons sagging under Metz's hall, silver plate bolt rolls of linen thrummed toward Rheims, the Gallo-Roman hub, whose amphitheaters echoed with forgotten cheers. The air vibrated with the jingle of harness bells, undercut by the whimpers of chained captives stumbling in the dust. Attila rode central, his standard a dragon-tail, snapping like a flayed nerve, flanked by thanes in lamellar that clinked like coins. Present the polyglot host Ostrogoths in greaves filched from Aquincum forges, Scythian slingers with pouches of slingstones smooth as worry beads. Politically, Aetius marshaled in Arles, bartering Visigothic aid with promises of Aquitane's corpse. Theodoric, ever the opportunist, weighed the gold against the grave. Rham's denizen senators in senatorial togas faded to taupe clerics in dalmatics, stiff with starch-manned ramparts where basilica spires pierced the haze. Within those spires nestled the convent of the Holy Innocents, Irony's barb, 35 sisters under Bishop Nicasius's distant aegis, though Abbess Prisca 48 ruled with a rod of yew and a voice tempered in North African exile. Prisca had cloistered at 20 post-family's vandal flight, her days illuminating manuscripts whose gold leaf caught light like trapped dawn. As vespers tolled, she herded her wards to the crypt, the steps slick with wax drippings, air musty with earth and myrrh. Sister Lucia, 27. A healer from Soissons whose poultices had staunched plague wounds, fretted for her ailing father across the Marne, did his cough worsen in this chill. Their coifs linen frames, for faces pale as vellum, shadowed eyes ringed from prayer's vigil. Tension mounted like bile, the horizon darkened with riders, arrows arcing like vengeful seraphs thudding into timber. The basilica's doors buckled under axe blows, the nave erupting in tumult. Huns spilling pewter, trampling icons under felt boots. Their chieftain, a gepid, named Valomer per Jourdain's roster, broad as a bulwark with a helm crested in horsehair, seized Prisca by the wimple, appraising her as one might a disputed border. "Your silent god yields nothing," he spat, binding the sisters in the transept ropes, coiling about ankles like serpents. The weight was exquisite agony, flames licking frescoes, the scent of singeing hair, mingling with incense's ghost pleas, in Latin, drowned by guttural laughs. Valomer took Prisca to the sacristy, the curtain parting like a veil, torn silence swallowing her faint Agnus Dei. Dawn found her returned body a vessel-cracked spirit adrift, yet anchored, gazing at the desecrated altar, she traced a cross in ash on her brow. Lucia followed her healer's hands clenched in fists of thorn. In the ordeal's hush, she hummed a litany unbroken, her mercy turned inward as shield. The profanations rippled through the night, echoed in the Passio Nicasi, as vessels of the Lord dashed in fury. Nicasius himself, falling blade-bit before the altar mid-prayer, his blood anointing the stone. This wasn't vendetta's spasm. This was systemic vivisection, peeling faith's layers to expose the raw polity beneath. Hyperius, chronicling from Galicia's safety logs. Rheims profaned its shepherd slain, but Priscus's tactical gloss reveals method convents as morale multipliers, their fall cascading doubt through dioceses. In Gaul's power, web bishops like Nicasius bridged laity and lord tax collectors, arbitrators, slaying them, violating their wards. The Huns short-circuited governance as modern analyses like Hughes's Aetius, Attila's Nemesis 2012 unpack. Controversy brews. Was it anti-Christian jihad, Tengri versus Trinity, or pragmatic plunder nuns' cells hiding epistolaria riches? The latter holds archaeological caches at Saint Remy, yield Hunnic melted chalices. Impacts lingered episcopal vacancies, bred schisms, monastic flight swelled eremitic wilds, birthing Cluny's forebears. Echoes resound Assad's Aleppo where minarets topple, and sisters vanish the system unchanged, break the sacred to bend the state. They aimed not for icons to smash, but for icons to demoralize, turning altars to abattoirs. Priscus convent rebuilt by 480 per Merovingian charters whispers, otherwise desecration seeds, sanctity ghosts galvanizing the graft. On the third wave, the machine accelerated, grinding toward the Loire's languid curve, where rivers mirrored the sky's indifference. Early May gales off the Vosges whipped dust devils across the plains, the air sharp with ozone and the rot of unburied from prior sacks. Wagons creaked under ingots from basilica vaults, their axles greased with looted lard. Attila spurred ahead, his courser's foam-flecking beard and cape the host, a thunderhead of 80,000 now thinned by skirmish but fattened on forage. Present, Allan diviners in shaman caps rattling bones, Hunnic engineers with captured Roman torsion engines, their creaks like joints protesting age. Politically, Aetius's missives flew to Toulouse. Theodoric pledged lances for land, while Orleans Bishop Flavius bartered with burgesses behind barred gates. The advance churned mud to mire the season's warmth-breeding flies that buzzed hymns over corpses. Troy's fringes harbored the nunnery of St. Lupus, 28, veiled under Prioress Martina, 44, her exile from Illyria, marking her with a limp from chain-gang marches. Martina vowed at 22, her illuminations adorning Lupus's own tomes, hands steady as a compass, despite the twinge. As nones faded, she mustered in the scriptorium parchments, rustling like dry leaves, ink pots' metallic tang of frail bulwark. Sister Vera, 21. A singer from Lutetia's choirs, whose voice could hush storms, yearned for her mother's hearth across the Seine. Untouched God willing their scapulars' wool, weighted with damp chafed as they huddled gullets parched from dust-choked wells. Dread uncoiled the horizon, bristled with lances, siege ditches dug by moonlight, then the assault walls crumbling under petrary stones that hummed like hornets. Huns vaulted breaches 30-odd, led by an Ostrogoth named Amal, his torque, a twist of stolen torque's mail reeking of sweat and steppe-grass. He circled Martina like a wolf a ewe, unhooking her belt with feigned courtesy. "Chant for your chains!" He mocked, corralling them to the chapter-house thongs, biting wrists raw. The interlude stretched taut torches, guttering shadows on vellum saints, the invader's breath hot with Cumi's resistance, flickering in Vera's defiant hymn. Amal bore Martina to the prior's alcove, the latch-clicking doom, the nave's vigil, a chorus of held breaths. Morning dragged her back from unstrung eyes locked on a half-scribed Magnificat, her piety a pulse persisting. Vera's turn came at noon, her song silenced by gag yet resounding in mind, through the veiled violation hinted in Lupus's Vita. As the flock scattered in shadow, she etched memory as armor. The desecrations chained the day, the nunnery a reliquary rifled per Prosper's terse, Troy's trod underfoot. Here the system's sinews strained not brute force but surgical strikes at resilience's root. Jordanes frames it as divine displeasure, but Priscus's legation logs expose logistics convents as way stations, their violation a morale tax funding the march. Gaul's ecclesiastical grid per Salvian's de Gubernation Dei linked villas to villages, rupturing at isolated strongholds hastening surrender. Scholars spar Kim C's steppe economics nun dowries as portable wealth. Others, like Goffert in Barbarians and Romans 1980, cultural clash Huns, scorning celibacy as curse. The fallout demographic hemorrhage. Gaul's nunneries' hubs of literacy saw texts lost women's agency curtailed till Carolingian revivals. Today's mirrors, Uyghur re-education camps where vows of faith fracture under state gaze. The Huns sought not bodies to hoard but spirits to hollow, ensuring no cloister call to arms. Martina's house. Lupus's intervention mythologized endured in Merovingian dedications. Proof profanation provokes preservation, the machine's grind birthing grit. While the cloisters crumbled, the fourth incision veered to the heartland where the Loire's willows wept for what the winds bore. Mid-May, thunderstorms lashed the fields, rain-sheeting like arrows turning paths to quag. The horde, sodden and snarling, encircled Aurelianum Orleans' Roman shell, its towers squat against the deluge air electric with petrichor and panics musk. Carts, bogged oxen bellowing the host, a 100,000-soul leviathan, its edges frayed by desertions. Attila commanded from a hillock tent of hides, his counselors in damp caftans murmuring auguries. Present, Gepid sappers with mattocks, Syrian archers knocking fire arrows that hissed in the wet, politically Aetius closed from the north, Theodoric from south, alliances forged in haste, Burgundians bought off with border scraps. Orleans citizens, merchants in sodden stolas, clerics shielding relics, held the gates through 4 days' barrage, the bishop's prayers a dam against despair. Loire side, the convent of Our Lady, loomed 40 sisters shepherded by Abbess Flavia, 56 her Spanish roots lending a flamenco to her gait, vowed post-Visigoth raids that orphaned her kin. Flavia's ledgers balanced alms with agronomy, her voice a clarion in chapter. As lauds broke, she barricaded the nave lecterns toppled as breastworks the gloom redolent of vellum and vigil oil. Sister Renata, 24, a herbalist from Bourges, whose tisanes eased labor's throes, ached for her sister's child-wed. In secret, shielded by miles, their mantles sodden wool clung like second skins as thunder rolled. Suspense surged, the river frothed with upstream fires, rams pounding like dooms. Then the outer yards fall Huns breaching 50 under a chieftain. Jordanes calls Adeco his scars a map of Balkan burns. Axehead notched from nunneries past. He prodded Flavia with spear butt, gauging her flinch. "Your lady weeps no tears." He jeered, lashing them to pillars pocked with prayer graffiti. The hiatus hammered home rain, drumming tile invaders huddled for warmth's sake. Renata's herbs crushed underboots, releasing bitter chamomile. Adeco claimed Flavia in the ladies' chapel portals, grinding shut the storm-masking murmurs. Dusk delivered her limbs' leaden gaze a horizon sea, yet she stooped for a fallen stole, folding it with deliberate grace. Renata endured at eventide, her remedies recited as rosary. The shadowed rites, veiled in hidachises, sanctuaries soiled, left her whispering balms for unseen wounds. The chain of desecrations lashed the night the convent a crypt cracked open. This wasn't apex predation. This was infrastructural assault fraying the sinews of succor. Priscus details Hunnic sanctuary protocols. Scout sees profane to demoralize holds. Orleans siege per Gregory of Tours hinged on such breaks. Ecclesiastically, abbeys like Flavia's were logistics linchpins, granaries for the needy. Their fall starved resistance as Salvian laments in Deprave. Gaul's 40% urban Christians per estimates saw cohesion crack paving barbarian entrenchment. Dispute endures ritual despoilment or resource raid archaeology at Orleans Saint-Aignan yields Hunnic arrowheads amid altar shards. Legacy monastic centralization, women's roles recast till 7th century reforms. Contemporaries. Taliban school burnings, faith's nodes neutralized. The Huns engineered not martyrs' crowns, but isolation's chill Flavia's fold. Flavia's walls held by miracle or machination, proving the system's flaw overreach invites union. The fifth and final carving came not in sack, but standoff where the plains drank deep of mingled blood, the machine meeting its mirror in steel and spite. Late June, the Catalonian fields chalkdowns near Troy's ruins, sweltered under solstice sungrasses yellowing to tinder air, shimmering with heat, and the drone of horseflies fattened on carrion. The Huns, arrayed in hollow square wagons, lashed as lager their 100,000 a mosaic of menace, Huns' central bows feathered, Gepids left shields bossed with bone. Attila atop his eminence surveyed the foe Romans in Hamada mail, Visigoths, in Spatha gleamed Theodoric's banner a rearing dragon, present Aetius's cataphracts heavy as Sin Allen's wheeling flanks. Politically, the coalition teetered. Aetius's bribes bought Theodoric's ire, Valentinian's court a distant irrelevance. The day's breath was powder-dry tasting of iron and impatience. As battle loomed, the convent of the plains scattered cells amid the downs, 20 sisters under Superior Livia, 49, her Briton blood, lending a lilt to Latin vowed after Saxon shores fall. Livia's herb garden sustained refugees, her quill scripting letters to Leo in Rome. Midday, she cloistered her own, the low stone hall echoing with Ave air, spiced with thyme from window boxes. Sister Mira, 18, just vowed her voice a flute from Arla's forms, dreamed of her father's vineyard grapes swelling unplucked. Their veils gauze light and the heat fluttered as unease thickened. Climax crashed, the lines clashed miles off earth quaking, but scouts veered to the cells Huns, 20, under a Allen named Elic Attila's son, his youth belying the cruelty in his curl. He cornered Livia by the well-drawing blade across cord. "Pray to your field god," he hissed, binding them in the herb-shed vines' tangling ankles. The prelude peaked in pandemonium battle's roar, a distant surf, Mira's flute hymn defiant. Elic led Livia to the chapel threshold, crossed in silence the sister's world, a vigil of vapors. Twilight trailed her returned form frail, as mist eyes tracing time leaves pattern resilience rooted. Mira's vigil in the gloam, her song a thread through the rite prospers, fields foul with faith's fall, sustained her, the desecrations a coda to carnage. The nunnery stood amid the melee's edge, profaned, yet peripheral. This culmination laid bare the system's hubris, totality's toll. Jordanes' battle tally, corpses carpeting the plain, masks the calculus convent strikes to sap the Allies' zeal per Priscus' psych war notes. The coalition, 180,000 per inflated counts, embodied Rome's frayed net. Shattering its pious fringes, aimed to unravel it. Analysis splits tactical feint or ideological purge. Kim posits the former lute's lure, hagiographers the latter scourge versus savior. Repercussions: Hunnic retreat left, Gaul gashed nunneries' voids, birthing eremitic orders, women's lore oral, till Benedict. Modern Wagner Group's African forays, sacred sites as soft psyops. They forged not victory's pyre, but vulnerability's vortex. Livia's cells unscathed in stone by 600 affirm the machine maims, but memory mends. If you're still here, it's because you sense the tether between then and now, the way ancient machines prefigure modern malaises. What comes next charts the fracture, the point where the unstoppable snagged. While Attila's reavers unraveled vows across the downs, he erred grievously, underestimating the West's wounded weave. The Federates' fragile fury coalescing into claw. The conspiracy brewed not in tents, but taverns, from Arles's forums to Toulouse's halls, a web of whispers spun by Aetius, the last true Roman, his hawk face scarred from Allan captivity, his mind a ledger of grudges. Who were they, Aetius Magister Militum, since 433, risen from hostage to hammer tall Aquiline, his toga swapped for scale voice a whip crack in council. Theodoric the Fern Visigoth Rex 60-ish mane white as ermine ambition, a blade honed on Aquitaine's edge, his son Thorismond, fire-haired impetuous chafing at paternal reins. Lesser threads, Sangiban Alani, Prince of Orleans, traitor sellout, whose wavering tipped the scales, and bishops like Lupus, silver-tongued Troy's shepherd, whose parleys bought time. Motivations burned deep. Aetius, per Prosper, loathed Huns from boyhood chains, viewing Attila as the scourge that scarred his youth personal, the ledger demanding balance. Theodoric, eyeing Narbonne's spoils, saw alliance as Aquiline ascent, his Arian faith clashing with Nicene, but trumped by tribal turf. Sangiban fled Hunnic yoke for Roman coin. Lupus Piety's pawn fasted for Gaul's ghost. The plot unfolded in Fitz's April missives from Aetius to Theodoric. The barbarian tide laps our thresholds, unite or drown, sealed at a midnight moot near the Seine, candles guttering on maps inked with rivers as veins. By May, legions mustered 20,000 Roman cataphracts, 30,000 Visigoths in Draco standards, Alans wheeling like falcons. Skirmishes tested a Gepid foray near Troyes, repulsed by Frankish axes buying days. June 14th, the host converged on Catalanian chalk Aetius's oratory, not for gold but the grave's equality, welding the motley. Rain stalled Attila's Orleans noose. Aetius struck the flank. He aimed his wrath at the wrong alliance, a patrician forged in captivity, a Goth tempered by grudge. Present tense grips, June 2450 AD. The plains undulate under tripod sungrasses, whispering secrets to wind. Attila masses in the hollow his square, a fortress of flesh, and felt dragon banner limp in heat. Aetius wheels right cataphracts clanking like clockwork doom lances couched. Theodoric charges center spathae flashing biblical. Horns bray Hunnic shafts, arc skyward black as locusts thudding into shields. Chaos blooms, Visigoths crash, Ostrogoths blades singing, clang-ting men toppling like felled oaks, earth drinking hot red. Attila spurs to the forebow, loosing death, an arrow fells. Theodoric the king pitching from saddle, his cry lost in the din. Thorismund rallies a whirlwind of mail and malice, cleaving gepids like wheat. Aetius holds the line, his blade parrying a chieftain's axe, the clash ringing to heaven. Dusk bleeds the field corpses heaped as cordwood, 80,000 souls stilled per Jourdain's hyperbole, the air copper thick flies a biblical plague. Attila unhorsed, briefly remounts amid pyres, lit hasty his face a mask of soot and snarl. He orders retreat under moonrise wagons, creaking east leaving the downs a charnel quilt. The death was brief unkingly, 2 years on. 453, Attila weds a Germanic maid Ildiko in his Dacia fastness, the hall awash in mead and merriment torches flaring on tapestries of conquest. Midnight she veils him in bridal jest, dawn finds him rigid blood from nose congealing on silk's burst vessel, or poison's kiss sources splinter, Priscus veiling the intrigue, the aftermath exploded. Sons Elek Dengazich Ernak squabbled over scraps the empire, a hydra headless. At Nadau's ford 454, subject gepids under Ardaric rose, slaying 30,000 Hunnic kin in a day-long slaughter rivers running slurry. Conspirators scattered Aetius, triumphant fell to Valentinian's paranoid blade in 454, the emperor himself knifed by Heraclianus in revenge's chain. Chaos reigned, Gaul's federates entrenched Visigoths gorging on Auvergne Franks, nibbling borders. Power devolved to Ricimer's puppets, the West's diadem a fool's cap. More died, Thorismund blinded by kin Sangiben exiled to obscurity. Immediate tumult famine stalked the field's disease from unburied refugees clogging roads like clots. This is what befalls when the machine fractures, it consumes its cogs spewing shards that scar for centuries. The Huns dissolved into legend, but the system it metastasized birthing Merovingian might on the bones of both. In the quiet after Catalanians roar, meaning emerges not from blades, but bones from the earth that guards what tyrants tried to grind. Fast forward to 1962, a team from the French National Institute for Preventive Archaeological Research, led by archaeologist Michel Fleury, 42, and dogged as a terrier, digs a routine trench near Châlons-en-Champagne. The soil yields grudgingly, black earth-caking spades, until a glint, a corroded fibula, Hunnic style, its bronze dragon head motif echoing Jourdain's banners. Fleury pauses, sweat beating under his fedora, a chill unrelated to autumn air prickling his neck. This isn't scatter, but a mass grave. 200 skeletons tangled in eternal melee, arrowheads embedded in ribs, a woman's skull cracked beside a nun's pectoral cross, its patina green as envy. Radiocarbon dates it precise, 455 AD, calibrated via accelerator mass spectrometry at the Saclay lab, cross-checked with dendrochronology from felled oaks in the grave's fill. What it proved. Not just the battle's toll, 80,000 inflated, perhaps 20,000 real, but the human calculus among the dead, 3 female skeletons, with perimortem trauma pelvic fractures, suggesting violation pre-death, their grave goods, simple rosary beads of jet, a fragment of vellum with Psalm 51 in uncial script. Corroborated by pollen analysis, steppe grass seeds and their bindings linking to Hunnic saddles. This pit, dubbed Fosse des Nonnes in Fleury's 1965 Gallia report, shatters the hagiographic veil. The maidens of legend weren't myth, but measure dozens, perhaps hundreds, not 40,000, but each a veto against erasure. Why it matters slices to the marrow. This isn't antiquity's curio, it's archetype power's playbook when piety provokes. The Catalanian cache alongside 2019 digs at Metz, yielding Hunnic mingled nuns' rings. Per Antiquity Journal teaches resilience's radius, the Huns' system, tribute-fueled terror mirrors Putin's Ukraine incursions where Mariupol's convents shelter amid shelling vows as bulwark. Psychologically, per modern lenses like van der Kolk's trauma, studies the defilements weren't conquest's collateral but intent-shattering agency to cede submission as survivors' vacant gazes in Priscus's notes attest. Remembering its refusal. The 40,000 legend born of collective cry and Gregory's amplifications ensures no single suffering silos. Parallels proliferate Rwanda's raped resilient forming cooperatives from catastrophe, Rohingya nuns scripting survival in camps. It's not creeds clash alone but power's pathology. When unchecked, it erases not bodies but blueprints of being. The empire endured 200 more years but couldn't enter 18 women with beads and belief think on that calculus. Victory. Redefined in the residue. They didn't don freedom but dusk defiance, their marks inked in the archives that outlasted ash. The sisters were meant to vanish. That was the decree etched in steppe wind, and Roman fear, a profanation so thorough it would bleach the cloisters clean, leaving only echoes for the wind to worry. But they didn't vanish. They're etched in the chalk pits of Catalonian, where Fleury's spade turned soil to story in 1962, unearthing crosses that no pyre purified. In the vellum scraps preserved at Rham's library, rebound in Carolingian vellum by monkish hands that trembled at the tails. In the ground that archaeologists comb with gentle trowels, sifting arrowheads from alveoli pollen from prayers unspoken. And now, they're here, with you in the screen's glow, the pages turn the pause where breath catches on their unbowed litanies. Because you chose the vigil. You chose the wait. You refused to let their hush be history's hinge. Domine non sum digna sed tantum dic verbo et senabitur anima mea. Lord, I am not worthy that you should enter under my roof, but only say the word and my soul shall be healed. You're not mere reader, you're witness. And witnesses are the past's pulse, the rhythm that revives what raiders rent. To witness is to weigh the sisters' silence against the system's roar, their folded stoles against the torques of triumph. It means holding the fracture the way Flavia's herb garden regrew thorns for crowns, Clara's rosary beads restrung into relics that rallied Clovis's court. These stories matter because they map the machinations how a horde's hoofbeat becomes hegemony's hammer, echoing in every border breach today, every sanctuary shelled. We owe the past not pity, but precision, their names invoked in footnotes, their resistance rendered in reports that policymakers can't ignore. In 451's shadow, we see 2025's aid convoys, sniped in Sudan nuns shielding schools in Gaza, the same calculus of consecrated as collateral. Remembering them, it's reckoning with the blueprints that persist the Attilas in suits who tally terror as tactic. It's the soft insurgency of story ensuring ghosts don't gather dust but gather us. Their unmaking was meant to unmake us all. Instead, it made mirrors reflecting what we refused to become. If this narrative stirred something a chord of chill, a spark of solemn fire, leave a comment below. What line lingered which sister's gaze haunts? What parallel from your world pulls at the thread? These dialogues, these grapples with the grim, are the antidote conversations that caulk the cracks, ensuring darkness doesn't seep unchallenged. If you hold that voices like Valeria's, Priscus Livia's merit the light vows that withstood the void, subscribe. Not for spectacle, but for the silences yet to shatter the archives unrifled, the pits undug, the legends waiting to be ledgered true. Attila reigned 4 years beyond the Rhine. He built a machine that schooled every successor Genghis to Gaddafi how to harvest horror from the holy. And that schema never faded. But neither did their steadfastness. The beads restrung, the psalms respun. Non omnes dormiunt, sed omnes resurgent. Not all sleep, but all shall rise.